welcome everybody. This is the Endocannabinoid System, cannabinoids, natural products, and diet. So we're going to really talk a lot about the system that cannabinoids and CBDs and medical marijuana, things like that affect. There's a lot of other things that affect that system other than CBDs and natural products. And we're going to go through a history of medical marijuana. We're going to understand the 1, 2, 3s of the endocannabinoid system. So if you don't really understand anything else about this class, if you will, hopefully you'll remember and understand the 1, 2, 3s of the endocannabinoid system. That's kind of the meat of the class, really. Then we'll gain an understanding of how our diet really is influencing our health right now. We'll understand the differences in how the medical community currently view a condition versus how we'll view those conditions in the future. And then we'll understand how current medical conditions are helped by things like CBDs and kind of how we can view this in a different way. And lastly, we'll better understand kind of how to look at what's wrong with us and maybe how to fit that into a taxonomy to be able to help people. So if you're in retail, this is potentially, might be helpful to you in analyzing a problem and helping get someone a solution. Just as background, my name is Chip Paul. I kind of wear two hats, so I'm an activist. My wife and I started the first nonprofit in Oklahoma to go after medical marijuana. We petitioned the state with our nonprofit in 2014 with a petition that I wrote. That was not successful, but we completely changed the tone in Oklahoma, and then we turned around and did that again in 2016 and were successful with a petition that I wrote. So I'm the author of the law in Oklahoma, and I'm still deeply involved in everything medical marijuana in Oklahoma. In addition to that, in 2014, my kind of corporate or industry or theorist hat is in 2014, we formed a company called Newfound, and Newfound was formed really around a new theory of human function, which indicated that the endocannabinoid system was your master regulatory system, that it was manipulatable with a lot of things other than cannabis. Okay, so if you want to read my bio, I'll send you a copy of the presentation, but that's my bio. So real quick, in order to do this, I'm going to quickly walk you through a history of medical cannabis because I think it's important to understand the discovery of the endocannabinoid system and how that came to be. So, when did medical marijuana happen? Well, it happened a long time ago. So the first evidence of medical marijuana and hemp in our culture, if you will, in the world, is over 10,000 years old. So you can go back to 8,000 BCE in Taiwan and China. You can find hemp that was used to create pottery and tools. Fast forward to about 2800 BC in China. You had Chinese begin to write down things, the written word, right? So, and they actually created a symbol for marijuana. So that is the symbol for marijuana. Ma is what it was called in 2700 BC. Again, it was admitted into the Chinese pharmacopoeia, and Chinese love their herbal medicine. In 1500 BC, the Egyptians were using it in 1200 BC for all kinds of different things, and it came over with the Jamestown, settlers to the United States as hemp. So medically, how's it been used? In about the 1800s, there was a guy named Sir William Brooke O'Shaughnessy. He was the first guy to actually do IVs, so he did the first intravenous blood transfusion. But he also was one of the first guys to begin to document medical results with cannabis. In about the 1940s, you had a society pop up in Europe called Club des Hachines. These guys used marijuana recreationally. So they actually ate hash to get high, and it's the first real recreational public, I would say, use of marijuana. In 1850, it was added as Indian hemp, but marijuana was added to the U.S. pharmacopoeia. So that means that it was a valid U.S. medicine. If you were a physician, you could prescribe it. If you were a pharmacy, you could dispense it, if we had pharmacies back then. So what happened to it, right? What happened to it? Well, Indian hemp or medical marijuana or hemp, however you want to look at it, is a lot of things than a lot of things, okay? So it's a better, really, source of fiber than cotton. It's a better source of cellulose to make paper than wood is. It's a very good medicine, as we know. So that threatened a whole lot of industries. And you had a guy named William Randolph Hearst that owned a whole lot of forests, which was wood, that he used to make newsprint to run in his newspapers, and he owned a whole lot of newspapers. And so he was one of the main guys that felt like hemp threatened his whole situation. He needed to demonize and get rid of hemp. He's the guy that bought Reefer Madness and kind of made it into what it is. He's the guy that wrote all the marijuana stories about the crazed Latinos coming up from Mexico and, you know, cutting up farmers in their beds and all that kind of stuff. So he was that guy, and he did a good job of demonizing hemp. So by the late 1930s, you had a guy named Henry Anslinger come in, run the Federal Bureau of Narcotics. He ended up hiring a guy named Roger Adams to really figure out what Indian hemp was. Roger Adams is the first guy to discover CBD. He's the first guy to discover CBG, CBN. He discovered a lot of the minor constituents in cannabis in 1940. He also theorized that the psychoactive molecule was something that he flipped from CBD called THC. And he coined the term THC. And there's some interesting things about him. But anyway, he went on to kind of screw himself over with sugar. But he really is the guy who kind of is the first guy to characterize cannabinoids. We give credit to Meshulam, but it really was Roger Adams. So again, let's talk about Meshulam real quick. So Meshulam was really the first guy to come along and say, Roger Adams flipped CBD to THC. He didn't discover it in the plant. Meshulam discovered it in the plant. 1968, University of Mississippi became the first U.S. university to grow marijuana for medical research. I'll tell you a quick story about that because it's kind of a fun story. So we started doing all our endocannabinoid research like 5 or 6 years ago, and we got associated with the University of Mississippi. I got invited down there to speak to all these PhDs and kind of tour around and talk about them, about their research and kind of what we were doing. And we went through the medicinal garden. So we got to tour this picture, basically, but the indoor medicinal garden. And I got to meet the 2 PhDs that were doing this. So I walk in and I say, what strain are you guys growing? And they said, Wohaken. I said, okay, great. What else? Wohaken. Really? You've only grown Wohaken all this time? Yeah, we can grow it, great. Same height, same consistency, every time. Grow it the same. Great SOPs around doing it all that. Go, do you know what you guys have done? I mean, do you know that marijuana works on a continuum? Is you have indica and sativa, and those are 2 completely different effects. You fully characterized this. You don't know anything about this, and you don't know anything about this. And they frankly didn't even know that, which is kind of sad. They didn't even know that they'd kind of characterize this one CBD THC terpene profile, and that's the only thing that has been used for NIDA real marijuana research in the United States. So think about how limiting that is, right? Think about how limiting that is. But anyway, this is opening up now, and so that program will expand beyond University of Mississippi as much as they don't want it to, but it's gonna. 1978, New Mexico passed the first medical marijuana legislation. Nobody really realizes New Mexico was first. Everybody thinks California was first, but New Mexico kind of was in there early. In 1990, this is really the beginning of the discovery of the endocannabinoid system. So scientists, and this is not that long ago, right? 1990, they said, gosh, we have these receptors in our brain that light up like crazy when people take THC. Okay? And they called them cannabinoid receptors because it had to do with cannabis. In 1991, you had the first medical marijuana initiative passed in San Francisco. In 1992, the scientists discovered that these receptors that you had in your brain that lit up with THC, they also lit up with an internal thing that you have called anandamide. And so anandamide was discovered and coined anandamide, and kind of Meshulam's group was associated with this. But that was the first internal thing that acted like kind of THC that they found that modulated these receptors that we had in our brain. I kind of have activism in both things in here, but 1996, California really became the first state with 215. And in 2018, Oklahoma, we became the 30th state. Very proud of that. But we've done things a little different in Oklahoma. We have a little more freedom, I would say, in our program by virtue of learning some things for the other programs. Okay, so this is kind of the second part of the class, if you will, but we're going to get really into the endocannabinoid system now, and so a little bit more of the mechanisms of how it works. But I like to describe this system with really 1, 2, 3s, you know, the 1, 2, 3s of the endocannabinoid system, if you will. So if you kind of don't remember anything else about this, you might kind of try to remember the 1, 2, 3s. But the endocannabinoid system and its discovery are landmarks of human achievement, yet still lay outside normal medicinal and science channels. This presents a tremendous opportunity, but also many challenges. I hope to enlist you to spread this information and knowledge that will challenge this entrenched system. So again, this isn't going to change unless we push on this system. This isn't going to change unless you guys demand change. So isn't it cool with CBDs, medical marijuana? If you look at, this is what fascinated me, just all the different conditions, right? So all the different conditions it'll heal, you know, bright and sunny and energetic all the way to calm and anti-anxiety, and you know, how in the world does all that work? How can one plant sort of run that realm? Well, it works because of the endocannabinoid system. Now, why don't you know about this endocannabinoid system, and why doesn't your doctor know about it? It was only taught at a graduate level last summer. Okay, so University of Maryland opened up their program and only began teaching about the endocannabinoid system at a graduate level last summer. So when you go talk to your doctor and you say, "Doc, I think I have something wrong with my endocannabinoid system," and he looks at you like you're smoking crack, that's why, because he's just, you know, unless he's been around kind of our world, he's never heard of it, right? So what we're dealing with our entrenched system is really a lack of education right now more than anything else. Once a physician knows what I hope to teach you guys today, I don't think there's any way that he could not be at least intellectually curious about how this stuff works and why it works. Okay, so let's get into this. All right, so number one about the endocannabinoid system, it's really old. So we developed it in something called a sea squirt. A sea squirt was the first guy to be able to move in the bottom of the ocean. He had a mouth, he had a stomach, he had an endocannabinoid system, he had an exoskeleton, he had a tail, kind of had a central nervous system, a twitchy one, right? But very not well-developed thing. That's where we developed an endocannabinoid system. From that guy, insects went one way, everything else on the planet went the other. Everything else, for the most part, on the planet has pulled an endocannabinoid system up the evolutionary ladder to right now. So your dog has an endocannabinoid system, your cat, your fish, your bird, your reptile, all have endocannabinoid systems. That should tell us all how critically important this system is. We developed it before you developed internal organs. We developed it before you developed lungs, before you developed gills. It's important as hell. So point one about it is really old. Point two about it, and important and common. Point two about it is it's looking to be our master regulatory system, okay? So what does that mean? That's a big claim, master regulatory system. Well, again, if you want to satisfy yourself to this, go out to nih.gov and you need some, nih.gov is where our nation stores all of our research. So if you're a pharma company and you do research, you're going to publish and it's going to go up on nih.gov. If you're a graduate student, you're doing research, you're going to publish and it's going to go up on nih.gov. So it's our nation's really clearinghouse for research, and it's a good way to find information about stuff. But if you go to nih.gov and you put in the keyword endocannabinoid, you're going to get hundreds of thousands of studies on the endocannabinoid system. Some of them have to do with cannabis, some of them don't, okay? If you put in endocannabinoid and immune, you're going to get lots and lots of studies. Endocannabinoid in feeding and craving, endocannabinoid in mental health, endocannabinoid in cognitive function, endocannabinoid in skin, endocannabinoid in toe fungus. You're probably going to get a study. It's that well studied, okay? So as you look at those studies, though, what do those studies say? Well, the studies are all siloed, sadly. So immune guys will only study and write about immune stuff. Feeding and craving guys will write about their stuff. Skin guys will write about their stuff. But if you go down those silos, it's very clear that they all agree that the endocannabinoid system regulates and is deeply involved in the regulatory down that silo. We're kind of the first to come along and say, looks to be our master regulatory system. There's not the study there yet, but it's absolutely, there's so much smoke there, there's got to be fire. So what does that mean practically, right? So, well, that's a lot of words and gobbledygook. What does master regulatory system really mean? How does that apply to my life right now? Well, it means we kind of work like our car, okay? And we understand that in our vehicle, we have a computer, and that computer is really always looking at every single system in our vehicle. So again, how much gas do we have? How much air do we have in our tires? Do we have windshield wiper fluid? What's the valve pressure in our engine? You know, all of these different metrics. And it's always trying to manage and balance all of these different metrics to perfect homeostasis within our vehicle. Because if it can achieve that, this computer, we get the most gas mileage, we get the most efficiency, our car lasts the longest, we don't get stuck out in the middle of nowhere, right? So guess what? We work the same way. So we have a hypothalamus hippocampus. Our hypothalamus hippocampus is involved with every regulatory function in our body. Our hypothalamus hippocampus is constantly watching feeding and craving, immune system, skin, all these different systems in our body to see if we need something or need to do something. If we need something or need to do something, the endocannabinoid system is used to perform those tasks either directly or indirectly, okay? So every single up and down regulation in your body, the endocannabinoid system is involved with, kind of like our car and the computer, or really the electrical system, but the computer's the brain. Okay, so let's get this even more practical. So, you know, again, what are you talking about? Good to see you. What are you talking about, Chip, here with master regulatory, and how does this work? So let's talk about how your immune system works a little bit, okay? And let's say you don't like what old Chip's saying up here, and you throw a rock at me, right? Bing, that rock hits me in the head. I'm going to have a pain response associated with that. But, you know, how does this, so I have this happen, right? What happens to my body? How do I have a trauma, what happens? I have to repair that trauma, what happens? So again, I have a pain response associated with that initial impact. What does that mean? Well, how does my body understand how much area to inflame under trauma? That pain response is probably communicated, this isn't research, everything else I'm saying is pretty much research, but is probably communicated by my hypothalamus, and that's how I understand how much area to inflame. So how do I understand how bad a trauma is? Again, that's an interpretation by my hypothalamus, but my body makes a decision on how much area to inflame. Hypothalamus uses the endocannabinoid system to inflame that area. When that area is inflamed, my hypothalamus hippocampus then uses the endocannabinoid system to cue stem cells. You're a nerve cell, you're a bone cell, you're a blood cell, and that's how that area is repaired. Then, when it's done, my hypothalamus hippocampus uses the endocannabinoid system boop, to deflame the area. So you've heard how the endocannabinoid system is involved with inflammation, deflammation. This is directly how it works, right? So, but it works under the control of the computer in your vehicle, your hypothalamus hippocampus. So let's talk through something else. How we eat. A little bit of non-theory real quick. So again, it's looking like your hypothalamus hippocampus can literally watch you down to the cellular level for need, okay? Do you need vitamin? Do you need nutrient? Do you need endocannabinoids? Do you need norepinephrine? Do you need dopamine? Do you need serotonin? Your hypothalamus hippocampus is always watching through your endocannabinoid system for need, okay? But back to hard research. So as need builds in your body, what happens is endocannabinoids literally build in your hypothalamus hippocampus till they reach a satiety point. When that satiety point is hit, your hypothalamus hippocampus cues your pituitary axis to release a hormone called ghrelin. Ghrelin is what gives you hunger pains. So basically your brain is saying eat now by making you hungry, okay? As you eat, those nutrients go through your tummy and through your digestive. You have something called the vagal efferent nerve. That's the biggest nerve in your body. It runs directly from your hypothalamus hippocampus all through your digestive. But anyway, this thing is constantly monitoring how many nutrients you're getting. You have GPR 118s, GPR 119s. They're looking at these nutrients. And again, as your hypothalamus hippocampus understands, have I got enough? Have I got enough? Have I got enough? Have I got enough? I've got enough. The same thing happens. Endocannabinoids drop to below a satiety point. When that satiety point is hit, hypothalamus hippocampus uses the endocannabinoid system to cue the pituitary again to release another hormone called leptin, and that's what makes you feel full. So that's how you eat. That's how you regulate your feeding and craving behavior under the endocannabinoid system. And those two demonstrations show how you work your immune response is direct endocannabinoid action. How you sort of feed and crave is your endocannabinoid kind of uses other systems to work. Most of your organs are up and down regulated by hormones, but they're all under the control of your hypothalamus hippocampus, and the endocannabinoid system is always the mechanism of action for how those work. Okay, so point 2 about the endocannabinoid system is looking to be our master regulatory system. Point 3 about it, and I think this is the best point, the most fascinating point, and we just don't think this way yet, but we need to start thinking this way, is it's driven and run by natural resources, okay? So what does that mean? Well, we're all smart humans. We can supplement, and we know about CBDs and cannabis and all this, but if you're a deer, you're still a mammal. You have an endocannabinoid system. You can't smoke cannabis. You can't supplement. You have to have some mechanism for being able to take in basically endocannabinoids and build all these chemical mediators that you need to run you, right? So again, we don't think this way, but this is the way the world. Let me demonstrate this with an example. So endocannabinoids, kind of your top umbrella. Under that, you have your central nervous system. So I'm going to talk about a central nervous system, but I'll use it to kind of illustrate the point. So we all have kind of heard about dopamine and serotonin, right? So dopamine and serotonin are what are used to run our cognitive and our emotional state. Without dopamine and serotonin, we're a depressed Parkinson's patient. We have brain fog and we really can't generate mood, okay? So I don't want to run out of that. Give me as much dopamine and serotonin as I can get. Where do they come from? Where does dopamine and serotonin come from? And we just don't think this way yet, okay? But dopamine and serotonin come in particular from foods that we eat that contain L-tryptophan and L-tyrosine, or they come from omega-3, omega-6 fatty acids. Point of the story is this, that's not that important. If I put you in a box and I said no L-tryptophan and no L-tyrosine for you, and I scared you a few times where you ran out of dopamine and serotonin, you would not be able to build dopamine and serotonin. You would not have the precursors that you need to be able to build those molecules. You would be a depressed Parkinson's patient, and you would not recover. Now you come right back online. We don't recognize that the foods that we eat build resources that we need to run our bodies, okay? But the coolest thing about this, that it's a resource-driven system, is we can intervene with resources. So if we understand, well, let's recap on the 3 points. So point 1, really old, really ancient, developed it in something called the sea squirt. Very common. We share this system with most life on the planet. Insects we don't share it with. Interestingly enough though, insects that bite us, like a tick, will have a very rudimentary endocannabinoid system in their mouth. And if you think about it, you don't know that they're there. But anyway, insects don't have an endocannabinoid system. For the most part, everything else on the planet does. Point two about it's looking to be our master regulatory system. You can satisfy yourself with the amount of research. There's tons out there, but you got to know the magic keyword, endocannabinoid. And point three about it is it's really driven and fed by natural resources. In particular, omega-3 and omega-6 fatty acids are what feed the endocannabinoid system. So, knowing all that, let's say we're aliens and we're looking at the Earth, right? Just like if we were humans and we were looking at a sheep population. I mean, I hate to kind of call us sheep, but sometimes we behave like sheep. But let's say we're looking at a sheep population, and we would be able to quickly assess whether that sheep population is healthy or not, right? I mean, you just, sort of see the general health, or they, have good immune response, are they sick, are they throwing up, are they, whatever. There'd be metrics where you could assess their health. If you look at Earth right now, are we healthy? No. We're breaking in every way possible. We're breaking in every way possible. But could it be that we're just malnourished? If you don't put gas in your car, what happens? If you don't put oil in your car, what happens? If you don't put windshield wiper fluid in your car, what happens? Well, again, you have a malnourished car and you're going to have consequences with that. In 2001, you guys have probably heard of Ethan Russo, but a guy named Ethan Russo, if you haven't heard of Ethan Russo was the head of research and development for GW Pharma, and GW Pharma is kind of the European company that did Epidiolex and Sativex, I guess is their THC product. But he did all the research and everything behind, all those products. But he theorized that we were all malnourished. Serotonin box, and we don't even know it. So let's kind of walk down, some of these systems. If you look at what's wrong with us, 80% of us, 80% of us will die of inflammation. The leading physician complaint is, "Doc, I hurt," and how many of us get cancers? Those are all immune system breaks. Those are all immune system dysregulations. Those are all us being in an L-tryptophan and L-tyrosine box in our immune system because we don't have the mediators to be able to run it. If you look at feeding and craving, issues of the gut. So most disease states, every autoimmune is tied really to gut health and issues of the gut. Diabetes type 2 are all gut health. Crohn's and IBS, gut health, and autoimmunes are all there. Look at cognitive, so PTSD, anxious, depressed. Every single one of these, I would argue probably every one of us in this room, is sort of breaking here, in some way. But it's a resource thing. It's not a, and the thing that's bad about modern medicine is we get demonized around these things, right? So certainly if it's a mental thing, you're depressed. You're depressive, you'll never get any better. Well, really? Turmeric and black pepper might make you better, So again, we shouldn't do this, we should kind of do this. But we're breaking in all these systems. So can this be fixed? Yes. We're at a trade show where we're, fixing a big part of it. One of the best so 80% of us will die of some form of inflammation. Best anti-inflammatory on the planet. One of them is, minor cannabinoids and CBD, right? So we're sitting on the answer, and again, the answers to the endocannabinoid system, a deer doesn't have all this. A deer eats plants. A deer eats proteins. They have to find these solutions in nature. So do these solutions exist in nature? Absolutely. So we're going to talk through, as we talk through some conditions, we're going to talk through a natural products way to kind of go at things, a CBD way to go at things, and a kind of a cannabis system. So you have something called a Cb1 neuroreceptor, and you have a Cb2 neuroreceptor. You also have a TRPV1. You have a lot of different kind of neuroreceptors. But the way a neuroreceptor works is you have a neuroreceptor and you have a neurotransmitter, and that neurotransmitter will plug in and do work. So like in a dopamine system, he's plugging in, and your dopamine neuron is releasing more dopamine to kind of propagate an event. In your endocannabinoid system, again, you have anandamide as your natural guy at Cb1. He plugs into Cb1 and does work. But this is how you control every aspect of your body, really. You might control it indirectly through your pituitary, but you're controlling your pituitary this way, is with Cb1, and again, anandamide, and that plug-in at Cb1. So this is how you do work in your body. If you're inflaming, you're doing this work. If you're deflaming, you're doing this work. If you're cueing stem cells, you're doing this work. This reaction only stays active as long as something called hydrolase lets it. So you have something at Cb1 called FAH, fatty acid amyl hydrolase, but it's the way that that reaction is controlled. So to give you that background, I'll just say this. There's lots of ways that you can duplicate anandamide. THC is one. There's a molecule in kava called yanganin that's a Cb1 effector. Again, so that helps your ability to control your body if you can put more of those molecules in you. This neuroreceptor, there's things you can do with him. Again, this is how you inflame, okay? How you deflame is kind of you calm him down or reverse agonize him. Curcumin is something that's a reverse agonist of Cb1, as are some of the other things in the minors in CBD. So that's kind of the way Cb1 works. CBT works a little different. I mean, same principle, but he has, his main ligand is called 2AG, and his hydrolase is called Magal or Dagal, kind of depends on where it is. And there's a little bit more to it, but for the most part, if you can think about off, on, or up, down, or up regulation, down regulation, this system is kind of binary, and it kind of works like that. So the neuroreceptors, the main ones in this system, are Cb1 and Cb2, which we all know about. TRPV1 is what capsaicin hits. It's what cinnamon, the acid in cinnamon hits. So when you get that taste, that kind of heat, that's because of TRPV1. I can make you a herbal formulation or a CBD formulation, give it to you, you'll get an effect from that. If I put capsaicin or cinnamon in that, I can make that effect way stronger. So a lot of the synergies that we see with CBDs and cannabis have to do with TRP action in particular, but V1 seems to be a good one. MA is your cool, which is menthol, which is another good one. GPR55 is something that has to do a lot with pain. It's mainly expressed in your brain, but it's an endocannabinoid neuroreceptor. And GPR119 is mainly in your gut. Looking like it has to do with a lot with kind of nutrient and all that. So how are these modulated? Anandamide, 2AG, and OEA, PEA. OEA is not talked about a lot, but if you took anandamide as a molecule and you just flipped him, boop, you'd have OEA. And OEA really has a lot to do with how we regulate our sleep and wake cycles. So it's interesting, and I'm sure later it'll be talked about quite a bit, but it's a coming attraction, let's just say. So there's lots of externals, again, that'll modulate these. THC and yanganin will modulate Cb1, THC and beta-caryophyllene will modulate 2, cinnamon, capsaicin, a lot of things will modulate V1. 55, they don't really know. It hasn't been that well studied, so I don't really know of anything external that'll modulate 55 yet. I'm sure there are things. And 119 is kind of the same way. So those are coming attractions, I would say, in research. Okay, so 1, 2, 3 is on the endocannabinoid system. Really old, really ancient. Looking to be our master regulatory. Driven and fed by natural resources, basically our diet, but we can intervene with things like CBDs or natural products or a whole lot of things to kind of make things better. So in this module, what I want to really do is walk you guys through how a physician views you right now versus how potentially a physician might view you in the future, as a physician is trained on this stuff, let's say. So medicine will change around the knowledge of the endocannabinoid system. Physicians, as they are trained on the endocannabinoid system, will see human function a completely different way. Knowledge of nutrition and the endocannabinoid system will be the basic and necessary building blocks to practice medicine in the very near future. You can quote me on that. So these are and we'll start with kind of, cannabis because it's been studied, but these are the known medical conditions which cannabis has known efficacy. So that means that there are research studies, that show that cannabis works with these conditions, which are quite diverse and vast. Okay, so you guys know the term PDR. If you go to a doctor and a doctor doesn't know what's wrong with you, he's going to scramble back to his office and he's going to open this big red book called the Physician Desk Reference. And it's going to give him information about your symptoms and potentially what might be happening to you. And it's also going to recommend to him a drug regimen that's pharma, right? So we're going to talk about looking at you with PDR eyes. So what would that physician's desk reference say about you and your condition versus what we might say with our new master regulatory system eyes as we kind of look at you in a different way, okay? So let's consider, and I like to consider things that are getting worse, not better. So one of those things is obesity. Obesity is modern medicine handling this problem? No, it's something that's gone from 18% of us to 40% of us or something. It's very, very prevalent. I guess the stats are in there, but it's very prevalent now in the United States, and it's something that clearly modern medicine doesn't have figured out and is not treating well. So you go in, you see your doc. He probably knows what's wrong with you, but you say, "Doc, I have problems. I can't control my weight and all this." If he runs to the PDR, what the PDR will say is it's a judgment against you. Literally, it says you're weak-willed and you won't exercise. And how crappy is that, right? So, because that's not the problem, which we'll talk about in a second. But again, he's going to prescribe you some kind of steroid or hormone. Now, if you look at how you work as to function, endocannabinoid is kind of your top umbrella. Central nervous system is below that. Pituitary system is kind of below that, right? And so all those can be influenced up that umbrella. But when you start intervening in your pituitary system, again, you start pushing on a hormone, you're going to have unintended consequences. And there's not one thing, and again, this is true for most physicians, but there's not one thing, certainly for a obesity type doctor, that he can prescribe you that's safe, that won't have some kind of unintended consequence, that won't screw up your gut, cause other things to go wrong, right? So you go in to see your doc, he judges you by this book, and he prescribes you something that's going to hurt you, and it may or may not make you better. So that's kind of this state of obesity right now. So let's maybe look at this in a different way. So now I've got on my master regulatory system eyes, and you come in and you're obese. You're not obese, you're inflamed. In fact, you're severely inflamed. You cannot mediate the inflammation in your body. And that is exactly what's wrong with you. Why is this? This is kind of interesting. What happens if you rub poison ivy on your skin? Or if you're allergic to poison ivy, you inflame, right? So you have an allergic reaction, whoo, you inflame. You have an inflammatory response. You get red, puffy skin. Can you absorb through red, puffy skin? Certainly not as well as you can through healthy skin, right? With a lot of blood flow. You rub CBD oil on that, by the way, what happens? Oh, the inflammation goes down. You've just worked your endocannabinoid system with two external things, poison ivy and CBD. Isn't that kind of cool? Okay, so what happens if you ate that poison ivy? Not good, right? You can inflame in your stomach, you can inflame in your gut, you can inflame all through your digestive. Well, guess what you do every day? You eat poison ivy every day. You go to the FDA's website and give me the top 10 or top 20, it doesn't really matter. Most allergic foods and most things in our diet, corn isn't on here, but corn should be the number one giant thing on here. The endocannabinoid system is fed by two things, omega-3 and omega-6 fatty acids. And we have to have those in a certain range, just like the cell tryptophan and L-tyrosine. So about 1-to-1 or 1-to-4. Corn oil is very prevalent in all our meat sources. It's fed to our meat and it's fed to us. Corn, 1-to-40, okay? When we eat things in our environment that are 1-to-40, our bodies don't know how to handle that. And there's a lady named Dr. Artemis Simopoulos has done tons of research. She wrote the Mediterranean diet. She's the one that did all that research, but she did it around omega-3, omega-6 fatty acid balance. I think she's just dead recently, but she's a friend. But you know, if you can go back and read those studies on O3, O6 balance, and you're going to those are going to track really closely to kind of endocannabinoid deficiencies in the endocannabinoid system. But we have to take these things in balance. And so corn should be on this list because corn is just so out of whack. But corn is one of the main things that we eat a lot of that really causes a lot of problems. But everything in our diet, everything almost is, you know, we're allergic to. So what happens when this happens? So think about this really. You got this puffy skin all through your gut. Can you absorb it 100%? No, absolutely not. So let's say I have a biscuit, and this biscuit has 100% of the nutrients that you need for the day, and it's got 100 calories. If you can absorb it all, you just need one biscuit, right? But none of us can absorb it all, right? So we're maybe at about 10% absorption because of all this inflammation. So I've got to give you 10 biscuits to be able to get the nutrients in you that you need. It costs you 100 calories, where potentially it should have cost you, it cost you 1,000, where potentially it should have cost you 100 calories. And guess what? Each biscuit is making it worse, not better. It's just adding to the problem. So do you see the loop that we're in? And it doesn't matter whether we're obese or not, we're all frankly in this loop, and we may be suffering, you know, in other ways, but we're all kind of stuck in this inflammatory food we eat loop. Can this be treated? You know, is there a long-term treatment for this? You know, how do we get out of this dietary-wise? This is really cool because I've studied this a lot. It's like, well, where do we get this disbalance of omega-3, omega-6 fatty acids? Well, we certainly get it from McDonald's when we eat the French fries, but what about the meat? Well, the meat that we eat, in fact, every single meat, unless you eat grass-fed and all that, which you may be able to get here in Texas, but almost every single bit of meat that we eat is fed the same shit we're fed. The same corn, the same grains, right? So their balance in the meat that you're eating is high. Omega-3, omega-6 is probably 1-to-40 in the meat that you eat. So our meat is poison right now. But if I feed cows or chickens or pigs hemp or any source of omega-3, their meat turns around and now they're omega-3 heavy and now they're a vitamin. Okay? So you can do the same thing to yourself, you can supplement, but you know, if you think about how nature works, and all those meat sources they weren't eating corn, you know, they're eating grass or eating, you know, out in nature. So we've kind of intervened with something that's easy, but we've kind of wrecked, you know, our diet in a lot of ways, but it's something that can be fixed. And again, we can intervene in ourselves. So again, if you have a lot of gut inflammation right now, you know, natural products, or essential oils are a good way to do it. Natural products are a good way to do it. You want to take something probably that you're taking orally. Turmeric and black pepper, you know, turmeric probably the best anti-inflammatory on the planet and really likes to go at your gut. Ginger likes to go at your gut. You know, so a lot of CBDs are good, but CBDs like to affect us all over, right? So if we have a very specific thing, you know, you're better off either combining those CBDs with something that's going to go to that specificity or go into a natural product, frankly, that has more specificity. Terpenes are pretty specific too, but that's the research there is budding, but not copious like it is kind of with some of this other stuff. Okay, so again, CBDs are a safe option for, by the way, again, so to compare and contrast, you go into the physician, says you're obese, here's your steroids or hormones. The physician doesn't have a safe option. None of this other stuff is unsafe, right? It all is completely safe. You can take buckets of turmeric, You can take buckets of CBD. You know, you can give it to your dog. Your kid can get into it. It's going to be fine. You know, it's safe. You know, there's certain things you got to be careful of, but again, it is safe for the most part. So again, like I said, CBDs like to affect you globally. Herbs like to affect you with specificity. So bioceutical is our kind of term in our company, but that is, you know, when we combine herbal products with CBD and cannabinoid products, you know, what happens? And so the science, the real hard science isn't here yet, but I'll tell you the anecdotal is that these work very well. So again, something with a milk thistle with CBD is going to have a lot more efficacy, we think, again, it's looking that way, at your liver than just CBD, okay? Because it drags that specificity. The herb kind of helps drag that specificity to wherever it's going. Interestingly, we started working with the University of Mississippi, you know, whatever it was, 5 or 6 years ago. And I got invited down there to talk to all these PhDs, so I'm all excited. I'm like, guys, I figured out all these herbs that modulate the endocannabinoid system. I can build cannabis. You know, we built an indica, we built a sativa. Isn't this exciting? They're like, yeah, whatever. He goes, Chip, we have a list of now 4,000 different herbs that modulate the endocannabinoid system that we've characterized since the early 2000s. And literally they gave me this spreadsheet about, some of these modulate way harder than, you know, THC or CBD or, you know, anything at CB2. So when you look at engineering things, you know, around this pharmacology, again, there's a whole sort of set of these herbal products that you can go with these neuroreceptors with to create effect. So this was done actually by there's 2 interesting PhDs, Jit and Babu, and they, University of Mississippi is, if you were, you know, one of those guys that swung around in the jungles in the Amazon, you know, in the 90s doing drug discovery, and you found your magic vine, you know, you would have sent it to the National Center for Natural Products Research at University of Mississippi to test. So that's what all this stuff that came in, they're just like, oh yeah, we'll assay against Cb1, Cb2. So that's what they did. So there's a lot of these things in nature is kind of what I'm getting at. There's, you know, THC is not the only Cb1 effector. Minor constituents in cannabis, you know, aren't the only thing that affects Cb2. So if you look at really what ails us mainly, again, it's this omega-3, omega-6 problem. What's that lead to? It leads to a whole lot of inflammation. Omega-6s are pro-inflammatory. That means it help us inflame. So we have a lot of inflammation. We don't have a lot of ability in our diet really to mediate this inflammation, okay? So that's kind of the long and the short of it. And that leads to a whole lot of problems. So let's look at another condition, autism. And autism is something that, again, it's something that's getting worse, not better. If you go to the PDR, a developmental disorder of variable severity that is characterized by difficulty in social interaction, communications, and by restricted or repetitive patterns of thought and behavior. So that's about as broad and generic and says nothing as, you know, you can get. If you look at kind of Autism Speaks, they've got some good statistics on autism, but you know, the one that really stands out is the 1 in 54 children now are affected by autism. When I was a kid, this, I don't know what it was 1 in 100,000 or something, right? So this is clearly a problem that's getting worse, way worse, not better. So is this worthy of going after? Absolutely. And autism is really weird and variable. You know, some kids are born with it, very few, frankly. Most develop it, you know, after a certain age and probably after, you know, receiving vaccinations, but that's unproven. So what are some of the treatments right now for autism? If you treat the behavior, let's talk about what it is real quick. So let me see how I kind of characterize this real quick. Yeah, we'll do this slide first. Yeah. So let's talk about what autism is. So, and again, in our company, New Pharma, we have a model of human function. So we look at you as how you work in kind of a different way than a physician would look at you. So we really look at you as how you're operating as a vehicle, if you will, under this endocannabinoid system. So with something like autism, are there obvious, a lack of windshield wiper fluid or a lack of gasoline, or are there obvious things, going on in that vehicle that we can identify in the endocannabinoid system? And it turns out there are. Okay, so we go back to your Cb1 Neuroreceptor and anandamide, and this is how you do work in your body. Okay, so running your mind, running your mood, all work in your body is kind of done through this action. So what do autistic people have that's dysregulated? They don't have enough of this. They do not have enough anandamide. So every single autistic patient will have lower circulating blood levels of anandamide than you and I would, okay? So they don't have enough anandamide, and they have too much of the hydrolase, too much of the controlling enzyme that controls connection. Not enough this, too much this. Can they do work? No, they can't do work in their body, right? So how do you attack that problem? Well, there's a lot of things that'll kind of control this. We'll talk about that in a second, but there's a lot of things that'll control this. There's different ways to attack that problem, but pharmacologically, if you will, what's going on with them is that, right? Central nervous system wise, that is the dysregulation. That is what's wrong with them. Okay, so how does pharma treat that right now? Pharma doesn't know that, so pharma kind of treats this in a different way. So pharma will treat the behavior. When you treat the behavior, generally most of these things are things that slow down your metabolism. Okay, so we're going to slow down your clock a little. And guess what? When we slow down your clock, that makes the hydrolase way, way, way worse. So when you treat the behavior with these kids, you're hurting the cognition, okay? You might get them to go to sleep or not stay up for 6 days, or they're so cool, these kids, they do all kinds of anomalous things, but anyway, if you treat the behavior, you're not helping them cognitively. Again, for hyperactivity, what do? Well, again, this is the Adderall and Ritalin and things like that. So they're speeding up the clock, right? They're speeding up the metabolism in the body. That does slow down the hydrolase a little. So again, you are able to have a little bit more control. So that is why that works a little bit as a strategy. But it's not safe. It's not safe. None of this is safe, right? So, what do? How do we attack this problem? Well, cannabinoid-wise, there's a lot of ways to control hydrolase. CBD controls hydrolase, so it'll control this a little bit, but it also slows down the clock. So you're kind of, fighting a two-pronged problem. There's several things you have to do to get it, but again, it just, speeding up the clock, you need to do, controlling the hydrolase, you need to do, and we've done that kind of in another thing, in a natural product that we have patented. But the cool thing about that is we've taken this condition, we've looked at it in a new model, we've seen what's wrong, and we built a product based on sort of those mechanisms. And that product now is getting clinical data. This graph looks a little weird because it looks continuous, but it's not a continuous graph. So this is 6 months in 2019. This is an autistic child. If you know much, then this is aggression to others. So is he hitting his mom? Is he hitting other kids? This is in therapy. So he did have a situation where they were treating him with THC, and he got down to a certain level. THC, again, so you look back to the problem. THC mimics this, so it gives you more control mechanism, right? So it does have, it works to a certain degree, but there's always a leveling off with THC. So they were using THC with him in 2019, but you can see through a 6-month period, he had 240 incidents of aggression to others. He started taking our product in April of this year. Again, he was on a pretty good path already, but as soon as he started taking the product, again, he's gone down to 0 basically now. Over the course of that 6 months. This was a kid that couldn't be, he was in our office 2 weeks ago and he wouldn't have been able to get out of a car, right? So he's just, it's a night and day difference behaviorally. Cognitively, what we're seeing is, eye contact coming back, kids that are nonverbal, less stimming, beginning to be more verbal. The kid on the left there, he is our longest running case, and he, the first day he started taking this product, he she gave it to him in the morning, and again, it's not like a miracle thing or anything, and I don't want to make it sound like that, but it just, these kids are so sensitive that you can make quick changes in them, which is really cool. First day that he takes this product, he plays with new toys in therapy, which she finds out about when she picks him up, but then she's driving home, and again, he's nonverbal. He starts humming in the back seat. She took a video of it and sent it to me, but it still almost makes you cry. But it just, he's never done anything like that. So we're seeing all kinds of stuff like that, but it's really cool stuff. But this is the power, of kind of what we're sitting on here with, this paradigm. So it's a big deal. It's a big deal. So back to kind of this list, and the last part of this we'll kind of walk through. I don't know how I did this. How did I do this? All right. Okay, so you look at these known conditions, and we're about done, but you look at these known conditions that, marijuana helps. Is there a way to kind of categorize these? So if you guys are retailers, or you're looking at kind of getting into the business, or even if you're formulators and you're wanting to go at things, or your patients, how do you categorize this? There's a whole lot of stuff. It's basically our endocannabinoid stuff runs the whole gamut of human function. So how do you kind of begin to categorize that? Well, inflammation is the easiest one, because again, if you're going in inflammation, you're going to get 80% of the people. 80% of us are going to die of some form of inflammation. And pain is also a big, broad category. Cognition, is a big, broad category. And immune is a big, broad category. And then skin is kind of a new category, but that's certainly a big, broad category. So rosacea, echinacea, psoriasis are all dysregulations of your skin, and your skin works in the same way you do internally for the most part. So let's talk about pain real quick, because again, pain is another kind of common issue that we run into in kind of our world. I had a great conversation. I had a pain management doctor come in the office for our manufacturing thing, and we had an opportunity to spend probably 2 hours talking to him. And I said, Doc, when somebody comes in, how do you know, how to treat them, right? With pain. I mean, do you test them? And he said, no. Is there a diagnostic? Yes. It looks like that. Like, okay. So you run your NSAID to opiate spectrum off that? Yep. So, but he also explained that kind of pain falls into some different categories. So you kind of have trauma-based pain, inflammatory type pain. So like I hurt my back a long time ago, it still hurts. It'll hurt, forever until I get enough stem cells and kind of re-cue my system to repair that area. But, it hurts because of inflammation. It hurts because of lingering pain. If you have something like shingles, that's completely different. That's a signaling type pain, or fibromyalgia or muscular sclerosis. Those are signaling type pains, right? That are the wind blows, and it hurts, right? So that's a different kind of pain. And then he said there's kind of this third category of people hurt and they don't know why. It's almost like an emotional, kind of type pain. But he said all really three of those are valid, things and need to kind of have some treatment. But they all will fall in this 1 to 10, pain scale. So again, as he, let's say you come in, you say, Doc, I come in and say, Doc, my back hurts, it hurts every day. How bad is it hurting? Oh, it's a 3. So he's maybe going to give me NSAIDs, non-steroidal, anti-inflammatory drugs. And that would be on the most benign end, or, up in the opiate spectrum, maybe a tramadol or something. If I'm really, really hurting bad, right, he's going to get up more in that opiate spectrum. But it's going to be NSAIDs to opiates. None of those things are safe, okay? So if I'm in pain every day, even if I'm taking an NSAID, I'm going to take it every day. It's going to wreck my gut, it's going to wreck my liver, and, there's known stuff. So he doesn't really have a safe option to really help you, sadly. So if you look at, kind of go to our world, are there safe options to help with pain? Yeah, CBDs will definitely help with pain, inflammatory type pain. Cannabis will definitely help with inflammatory type pain. Cannabis doesn't help really with signaling type pain. Does anybody use, I'm a medical marijuana patient in Oklahoma and I have pain and it doesn't work for pain. It helps me forget I'm in pain and it helps with inflammation, but it doesn't really work for the pain. CBDs, again, kind of do the same thing. They help with the inflammation. They kind of calm everything down. But if I'm hurting, I'm way better off with natural products. And I'm way better off taking a natural product. My wife is a 2-level spinal fusion patient. She's 8 or 9 every day. And that's part of my passion. I kind of want to help her, but I make her an herbal shot every night, and I can get her down to a 2, and let her sleep comfortably. But it's really with a lot of herbs. So herbs kind of have that specificity, and they have a tendency to work better with that signaling type pain. Cannabis and CBDs work really good with the inflammatory type pain. And they'll work with pain, but it's not, they work in kind of the way of opiate works, you just sort of forget that you're in pain. So there's better solutions. Okay, so let's kind of leave it there. And if you guys have questions or anything, feel free to, certainly you can hit me up via email. Come by our booth. We'll only probably have 20 minutes left or something, but come by if you want to. If you're looking at selling or distributing our products, hit us up. But all this is sort of available, and we're a very open situation in our company. So again, if you're a CBD retailer and you're looking to add product, or you want to white label stuff, or whatever, we're pretty open to those situations right now. So, yep, and that's about it. You guys have any questions? Nothing bright and burning. What are you guys doing industry-wise? So retail, or is this, are you kind of just wanting to learn more about everything? Yeah. Okay. I'll tell you something. So I'll give you some, it may or may not mean anything, but I'll give you some new information that not many people know in the world. Okay? Isn't that cool? So endocannabinoid system, I've told you omega-3, omega-6 fatty acids are what feed it. We have a tendency to think that our genetics are static, right? That I can't change my genetic expression. Here's what it's looking like, and again, this is somewhat research back and somewhat theory, but if I'm a deer, and I live in New Mexico, so I've got a pretty sparse diet, right? And I've got my things that I eat, but I would have to have a certain enzyme expression associated with that diet, these fatty acids, to be able to break them down in the ways that I needed to run me, right? And so that would have to be mapped out. And if I'm a deer in, let's say, New England, and I've got a really good food source, again, that might be a completely different mapping of enzyme expression because I'm eating different things. So the stuff is richer and other stuff, right? So different enzyme expression. You have a layer, a fatty acid sensing layer that sits above your endocannabinoid system that will change your mRNA expression and your enzyme expression based on the fatty acids that you eat. As long as you're between 1 to 1 and 1 to 5. We're 1 to 40 right now, so we're just broken, right? But in nature, this happens. And it would have to happen because you'd have to be able to adjust based on your diet. Now, the theory works if that little guy I talked about at the first, old and ancient, sea squirt, it only works if that little basic bug had this fat sensing layer. Right? Otherwise, the theory is invalidated. He didn't have one, so how the hell did we develop one? Turns out he had one. So I had a really interesting discussion with a PhD at University of Oklahoma. And University of Oklahoma specializes in eyes. They've got something called the Dean A. McGee Eye Institute. And glaucoma, is something that cannabis has helped for a long time. There's definitely your rods and cones in your eyes are endocannabinoid things. There's a lot of endocannabinoid action that works in your eyes. But the problem, like if you put THC drop in your eye, whoop, you absorb it right away. So it's really hard to get it to stay on the eye to have any kind of action on the eye. So they've worked with THC for a long time. They're like, yeah, you absorb it too fast. We don't even want to mess with it anymore, blah, 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 blah. But I'm talking to him and I go, yeah, well, what are you guys doing now? He goes, yeah, we've found this really cool thing. If we mess with your PPAR-A receptor, which is you have this fatty acid is called PPAR, and free fatty acid receptors is a neurological thing. So PPAR-A is part of this layer. He says, we mess with PPAR-A and it changes everything. We can get their MNRA to change. So, and so that's really cool, right? So again, there may be a way to simply by increasing the amount of omega-3s, omega-6s in your diet to change that expression. So that, that's kind of where all this could go. It's going to take a little while, but.
I studied epigenetics for a while. I was in the wellness industry, so I did a lot of nutrition consulting for about 20 years. And I heard so many times that, I can't get this weight off, or I have this genetic issue, or, it was all about, it was a gene that was passed down that they couldn't, it wasn't their fault. They couldn't do anything about it, right?
Right.
Like, well, yes, you can do something about it.
Yeah.
So it's interesting. I mean, the human body it recreates itself over time.
Well, and we. Yeah, and we are really way more configurable, than we think, and we do really work. In my mind, we're this, kind of very interesting, very complicated vehicle, sort of inhabited by an incarnated spirit, right? So, and you kind of get there, and it gets metaphysical and interesting. But where the crossovers, if you kind of go there, and that's kind of what we were talking about yesterday. We had the mushroom panel was really interesting. It went science and metaphysical. But if you look at those crossover points, and again, so if you're a depressive, right, I can help you, I can help with your mood, but I'm not going to be able to reset those pathways. Like PTSD, I guess, is the best example. So I can help you with that, but again, as soon as it's a supplement, as soon as it wears off, you're right back to the way you were. But mushrooms seem to be able to remap those sort of pathways, and it's interesting. But those sit, if you look at again these functional umbrellas, your endocannabinoid and then your central nervous system, mushrooms are sort of in one central nervous system. So you're not really modulating big up here. You're kind of intervening in a way, which is you're better off to provide resources to the big picture system and let it kind of decide how that all goes. But psilocybin appears to be a good kind of way to do that. So.
Is there a superior source of omega-3 and 6?
Yeah, okay, so that's a really good question. So if you go out on Google and you say, give me a good source of omega-3s, you're going to find krill oil, mainly, but, some kind of fish oil. Fish oils are broken down already. So fish oils, in omega-3s, the big omega-3 is alpha-linoleic acid, and then it breaks down into DHA and EPA. Fish oil is already broken down into EPA and DHA. It's looking like you're making your body go through that step of how much EPA to build and how much DHA to build is important. So getting it as alpha-linoleic acid is important, and letting your body, sort of forcing your body into that enzyme expression, if you will, as to how to build those subs is kind of important. So hemp oil has a lot of alpha-linoleic, chia seed oil has a lot of alpha-linoleic, cranberry seed oil has a lot of alpha-linoleic, hemp seeds, chia seeds, in cooking and baking, you can use them like flour, really. So, and those will help a lot. If you up your alpha-linoleic, that's how we'll survive, kind of all this. Mm-hmm. Yep.
You were saying there, I feel like this is a stupid question, but when you read nutritional info on the box of something, or do you have to accept, like, we're probably only getting 10% of what the system is?
Yeah. Yeah, really. It depends on what it is, and it depends on how inflamed you are. That's a really good point. So if you're eating a vitamin or something, why don't we absorb, 100% of that vitamin? That's, part of what adds to that. I've never really thought about it that way, but that's a good point. So even with a nutrient, like you're taking a turmeric black pepper supplement to help you with this, you're only going to absorb a little of it at first, but it's going to kind of over time help you with that. That's a good point. Yeah, hadn't thought about that. I learned something today.
Another question was, I was talking to someone about they give their kids CBD.
Yep.
If they can't sleep or anxiety and stuff, but after learning a lot about this, is giving a child CBD on more of a regular basis going to help them with their overall health?
Yeah, I mean, and again, depending on diet, right? But if we're just going to normal diet, we're going to McDonald's and Wendy's, and we're occasionally cooking 2 or 3 home cooked meals or whatever. Yes, it's going to help a lot. Again, that's going to really help. But I would find not a full spectrum with THC, but a broad spectrum with a lot of minors in it, in like a hemp oil or something, in an oil that helped. And like we have a product in chia seed oil, but other people would have, a product in hemp or something. So find, most people put CBDs in MCT because of absorption, right? So the way that absorption works in your body, Jorge, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but this is just kind of the logic, right? So your body wants to, how does your body work? What's your gas? Well, the gas in our body is fats, right? So we store fats long-term for long-term fats, long-term, energy use. And we store those in triglycerides, and we kind of know what those are. We store them, and it's garbage in, garbage out. So if we're eating 1 to 40 in our meat sources, we're storing 1 to 40 inside of us, right? If we're eating 1 to 1, we're storing 1 to 1. So that's how our body wants to, store fat. So if you look at cannabis as an oil, it's a fat, right? So your body wants to grab it, hold on to it. That's why THC lasts so long in your body and takes so long to metabolize out. Body wants to hang on to it. You can fool your body sort of with an oil. You can put cannabinoids in longer chain fatty acids. Your body wants to hang on to more. So omega-3, omega-6s, wants to pull those right in and hang on to them. Medium chain fatty acids, your body may or may not want to hang on to. MCT is a medium chain fatty acid. It really doesn't have many health properties other than just being a medium chain fatty acid. But again, your body may want to hang on to that, and if it does, it's going to take you a long time to absorb it, or it may not, and if it doesn't, you're going to absorb that really fast. So MCT helps in a way with absorption. And again, as you move further right of that, let's say to the more sugars and carbohydrates, those things are going to be absorbed even more readily because your body wants to burn those as energy right now rather than go into your fat stores, right? So that kind of is logically how we work. Again, it depends on what you're wanting to do. If I'm wanting to create a psychoactive effect, take that up quick. I want to get it up in you as quick as I can. If I want to create a lasting medical effect, I may want to put that in as long a chain fatty acids as I possibly can to get your body to store it so you'll use it over the course of time. So it's kind of 2 different strategies on how you build things, if you will. But we don't use MCT, and it's not for that reason, really. It's not for the absorption reason. It's because, like in a black seed oil, oh my gosh, black seed oil is full of beta-caryophyllene. But, technically black seed oil may be better than just straight CBD as to health. I mean, it's because it's just loaded with so many CB2 effectors. So in a down-regulating tincture, let's use that, not MCT oil. And so kind of that's what we've chosen to do. In an up-regulating tincture, you want kind of a complementary oil that's going to help with that up-regulation. So you want things that are going to kind of be uppity. Cranberry seed oil we use in our up-regulating because it's kind of uppity, but it's a good O3, O6 balance thing, and it's got vitamin E in it and all kinds of stuff. So we want to use, or we, us, New Pharma, we want to use things that complement or help, those cannabinoids do whatever we're trying to do, whatever finish, I guess, we're trying to put on the medicine. So that was a long answer, but was that too much? And Jorge, we finished.
The product you presented that you guys have for treating autism,
Yes.
is that contains both THC and CBD?
No. This is a straight CBD and minor cannabinoid product you can sell anywhere. So, again, if you have this problem, right, so you've got not enough anandamide, too much hydrolase, natural products-wise, there's things that you can use to control the hydrolase. There's things, yanganin, kava, right, so you could build, that product. You could build that product with cannabinoids, because you can do it with minors, and then you can do it with, you can do it with cannabis. Again, cannabis has THC in it, so that creates you more control. And then there's things, terpenes that you can use to control the hydrolase and the clock kind of. So you can build that in several different ways, but we've chosen to build it as a CBD product. As a natural product, frankly, just marketing-wise, it's not sexy. So, and been doing this for a long time. We have a pain relief, that I can give you as a product that will work as good as a tramadol. It's just based on herbs, natural products. And it works because it works with your endocannabinoid system. But you're not going to believe me. Even if you take it and it works for you, you go, wow, it's just herbs, right? So, but if I put a little CBD in there, even if it doesn't do a damn thing, it's just sexy, or for whatever reason. But that's kind of what we've found right now. It's just people's, how do you, and I'm not a good marketer or a good salesman at all. I'm good at doing this, but how do you sell this stuff? Well, again, you've got to stand out, and we try to stand out on our science, but that isn't always the best way to sell things, because it takes some explanation. I got to talk to you, right? So, yes.
Would you recommend broad spectrum instead of full spectrum for children, autistic children?
So again, you have to do several things there. So it's a little bit more than just giving them CBDs.
I have an 11-year-old autistic brother.
Okay.
And I've been giving him the full spectrum of our
Yeah, and so I'm sure it's helping. Yeah, so again, full spectrum is going to have more anandamide, right, because it's got a little bit of THC in it, and the CBD is going to help. But I'm not trying to sell you on our product, but what you'll find is that he'll level at behavioral kind of level cognitively, and you won't be able to kind of get him beyond that. But this is the thing that's unique about what we're doing as to THC solutions is we're cracking that. So our cadence still getting better, and it's been 7-8 months. So, yeah. But you have to kind of, and I'm trying to do 3 things, and it's patented, so I'm not going to tell you what I'm trying to do because we got smart pharmacologists in here. But, you have to kind of go at this at a 3-pronged strategy. So it's a little bit more complicated than what I'm telling you. But the principles behind it are exactly what I'm telling you. So.
Mom wears blinders, so she's like, don't give him this. But like, think
Yeah.
back, I am.
You're way better giving him a full spectrum with autism than a broad, okay? Because he needs THC because it's mimicking this, okay?
Yeah.
Yep.
Because he's mildly autistic, so he has this mood swings, and he's awesome.
Yep.
He's awesome.
How much of a difference do you see in him?
He's a lot calmer.
Yeah.
He's quiet. He's
Yeah.
very to himself.
Yeah.
Don't bother him. He's good. He's
Yeah.
not like a big giant. He's a big giant. He's 11 and he's way taller than me.
Yeah.
And but like I noticed that he's very calm. He's into his feelings, and that's something that we're like not. He wasn't into that.
Yep.
He was more like angry all the time.
Yep.
So now he's like, okay, like sister, I'm mad, or sister,
Yep.
you're getting me upset, or sister, I'm sad. So he's been more expressive on that.
Yeah.
So that's what I've noticed when he was taking it. I just want to know like between broad and full.
Yeah, full, definitely, because you need the T, because the T is mimicking, anandamide, so you're giving them more kind of control. So definitely, and if you can get yeah, it'll help more even. So yeah, yeah. Cool. Thank you. Okay.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you guys. Thank you for coming. Thanks. Appreciate it.